Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I'm Nicholas Torres. I'm the co-founder and publisher of the Social Innovations Journal, and we're so excited to have you here today as we partnered again with Ashoka and to bring you this special edition of Social Innovators Shaping and Leveraging Artificial Intelligence. And this is our session. The journal, this edition was launched this morning. And as many of you know, we like to do a Meet the Authors event so that people get to actually hear from the authors themselves, and hopefully it entices you to dive into the journal. Next slide. What we have planned for you today is I'm just going to give, for those of you who do not know the journal, just a little context of why we exist, and then I'm going to turn it over to our hosts from Ashoka, who will provide some remarks, and then move into two panels, and then we'll have some breakout sessions and then a conclusion. So the journal, we started the journal back in 2009, so we're almost into 15 years of publication. And the reason we did this was we realized that in the social sector, there's not necessarily, or back then, there wasn't a place for practitioners to really share their secrets. In the private sector, it's much easier to scale ideas because you scale a model, but in the social sector, it's not as easy because you have to take into account the social and political factors within an ecosystem. And so we thought the best way to share ideas across ecosystems was to start with this publication and provide a platform. Now, we are different than most journals in that we do accept open, we're an open access journal, so anybody can submit an article. But what we do is we try to curate editions with themes so that a lot of the content from global experts is in one place for anybody who wants to do research and really learn about that can take a deep dive into it. And we also do it in partnership with curators. And so, for example, Ashoka, we count them as the global experts in social entrepreneurship. And so they become a great one, and they have an amazing network across the globe. And so they are, in a sense, that content expert. Next slide. We do 6 editions annually. Our themes are under education, human services, social mobility, and health, but they're always framed within social innovation, social enterprise, system change, policy, and collaborations, as we think those are the vehicles in terms of as we try to bring together a more just and equitable society for all of us. As you see below, those are our curator partnerships. And we again, next slide, we again encourage you to submit an article along those themes, and when appropriate, we will include that in the editions from our curation partners. Next slide. Again, you can follow us on social media. And let me turn it back over to our host. So again, thank you, Ashoka. Thank you for curating this edition, and we look forward to the next hour or so.
Much, Nick, and hi everybody. My name is Anae Bereshel. I lead work at Ashoka focused on tech for humanity. And actually, we did something a little different this time, even though it's the 6th time that we've published an edition of the Social Innovation Journal. This time we brought in a partner in OpenAI. So you'll hear also from Sachin and Smita from the OpenAI team who helped us curate the issue and bring perspectives from both of our networks into this journal. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And I won't be long, but I just, Smita and I wanted to give a little bit of context for why this topic. I mean, I mentioned that I lead work around tech and humanity, so it makes sense to focus on artificial intelligence. But really, the bigger reason beyond the fact that that's my personal focus within this organization of social entrepreneurs, it's that we started noticing, both of our organization, OpenAI and Ashoka, that even though we're going through really an epochal shift, I think, in with the advent of generative AI in particular in the last year, though AI has been with us for much longer than that, we're seeing a popularization of AI and kind of application in all sorts of contexts since the release of ChatGPT and some other tools. And what we're noticing, though, is as fast as new regulations are being suggested and voluntary commitments are being made by companies in Silicon Valley, and large universities are talking about ethical principles, we feel that a critical voice is missing, and it's the voice of social entrepreneurs. Part of that is because there are a few venues like this one that allows us to kind of raise that voice. And the other part is that there are few social entrepreneurs actually working with these technologies, leveraging them for impact, and also looking to shape them. And so what we're trying to do with this edition is to showcase what's happening at this early stage of the field, and bring the perspective of social entrepreneurs, some of their how-tos, and some of the challenges that remain, right? So in this edition, you'll find 11 contributions from various parts of the world, from Brazil to India to Nigeria, Argentina, the US, Mexico, Germany. We really tried to bring a global perspective into this issue, and a variety of topics as well being treated here. So I'm going to pass it over to Smita from OpenAI to tell us a little bit more, and then we'll jump right into the couple panels that we have planned.
Thanks so much, Anay. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Smita Gupta. I'm a lawyer and I work with OpenAI. And I promise we named it first. Nyai actually means justice in Hindi. And so we're talking about opening up artificial intelligence applications to increase access to justice in the country. As a mission, we're a not-for-profit building digital public goods in the AI space. And the last 2.5 years since we've been present, we've seen the number of social entrepreneurs and in the space grow from a mere handful in the law and justice space, especially in India, from today to almost 100. And it has been a heartening journey to go along almost with these social entrepreneurs, creating spaces for them to break the silos between technology and law. And a lawyer myself, I've seen those silos break within our team and then externally as well. Having said that, I feel like there are still too few, social entrepreneurs. There's still a lot to be done, and we're only getting started. And this edition is really addressing that, while, of course, focusing on the amazing work that's been done by all of us across geographies. Also acknowledging that these are still early how-to toolkits on how to get started, especially if you're, just maybe you're a subject matter expert across education, health, finance, law, but only now getting introduced to the possibilities that technology and emergent technologies can unlock. Or you're a technologist who's now finding interest in different problem statements across many different domains. So where do you really start? So there are two main types of articles, trying to focus on these areas. First is, how do you really, within your organization, build up that readiness to be able to deal with AI, bring it into your workflows, and also start tinkering and experimenting responsibly, of course. But how do you start experimenting just to get your hands dirty and get a sense of what does it really mean to build AI, and what opportunities can it really unlock? Apart from that, we also have some really practical learnings which have been distilled from use cases in a variety of fields, as I mentioned, across justice, health, media, education. And really the purpose of this call now today to launch is to really focus on these areas. And so we'll be hosting 2 panels and a discussion, of course, over the next 1 hour or 1.5 hours. The first panel will focus on how to get started with AI. How do we get our hands dirty? What is the minimum viable project approach, the MVP approach? And the first conversation is with our authors, Nidhi, Auden, Danny, and Christina. And I'll invite Sachin to moderate that.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I was really empathizing with Hera when she was talking about the fact that she was doing this meeting for the first time with the baby, because downstairs, my daughter was battling with me on how loud the Taylor Swift can be, while the meeting is going on. And I was like on the side saying, not that loud, not that loud. But what do you do? Taylor Swift, right? Everywhere. Bangalore, India as well. What to do? But wonderful to get a chance to be here with all of you. I think that I always like to one thing that I practice is I kind of look ahead and imagine what this community can be a few years down the line. So if I look, 3 years down the line, can you have a community of a really diverse community of practitioners across the world, entrepreneurs, experts, policymakers, and the orientation is how do you make better, which is different from just analyzing the issues, right? How do you make better? and how do you make more collaboratively. And I think that that's where it comes to AI, it is really in the making that we learn the hard lessons. That has been my experience as an entrepreneur, that you cannot sit on the sidelines and say this can happen, that can happen. You got to dive in, and then you realize you realize it's much worse, and at the same time much more exciting. So I think it's great to be a part of these conversations. I am Smita's colleague with OpenAI in India, and one of my favorite things has been that um, right now Davos is going on, and AI is a big conversation, and uh, there was a discussion on OpenAI. I think Satya Nadella and Sam Altman were a part of that conversation. And I kept thinking, how cool will it be if one day, instead of OpenAI, they say OpenAI? So I don't know how far that day is, but I'm kind of hoping that even if it's a slip of the tongue, I'll take it. Anyhow, good to have you all. Wonderful group of authors. It rarely happens, but 3 out of these 4 wonderful people I have actually had a chance to meet and work with in some way. Nidhi, Odin, Danny, and it's just great that back in a group with you all. So I'll just share a couple of experiences at my end, and then I want to introduce these wonderful people, this very diverse set of people from different parts of the world. And I'll say this, which is when people talk about how do you get started, this has been a question that's been coming up again and again. How do you get started? Sometimes you have young innovators asking us, how do you get started? Sometimes you have very seasoned entrepreneurs saying, how do you get started? And I think that really they're asking this question from different domains, right? Different perspectives, I'd say. One is, of course, how do you get started in terms of skills? What do you need to know to get started? That is one I think question that comes up. How do you get started? What do I need to learn? Another is from the tools point of view. What do I need to get started? And that basket is increasing so spectacularly. It's crazy. We've seen how easy it is to get started now. And I think ChatGPT, of course, was powerful because it didn't say, go implement something, go download this. It just said, ask a question and get started, And the third is, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're getting some comments in the chat that you're a bit quiet, which is something I can empathize with. But if you can speak up a bit, I
Okay.
think everyone would appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. I've never got that before, but I will be louder.
Maybe it's the Taylor
Okay.
Swift.
Yeah, the Taylor Swift, I'm telling you. Okay, so so I mentioned that skills, what are the skills to get started? What are the tools to get started? And how do you get started safely? I can tell you that as makers who are quite confident on the skills and tools side, starting safely is like a big deal. It takes a few missteps to get it horribly wrong, especially if you look at sensitive use cases. One thing is to say, I'm going to give you travel recommendations on your trip to Northeast India. And the other is to say that I'm going to help you answer questions about the government benefit you're entitled to. It's a different order of magnitude. So I think some of these things are when you say, I want to get started, And what I have learned, I think what we have learned, what Smita and I and our team has, mixed team of technologists, lawyers, designers. I think what we've learned is that one is, it's so important when developing exposure. How can you build your awareness about what is possible with AI? I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, the truth is we just know too little about how it can be used. And one is to make a leap of imagination on our own, but the other is to just look at domains and see, oh, it's not just being used to answer questions, it's being used to for a variety of things. And I think just developing that exposure of seeing the use in different domains, because entrepreneurs and practitioners such as yourselves are creative people, and you can connect the dots, but something needs to create a dot in order to connect it. So how do you increase your basket of dots So you can connect it. I think there's absolutely no escaping increasing exposure to how it is being used. And also that gives you a sense of how it is not being used. The second is the collaboration. I think that it is so vital that when you're creating something which is sensitive, um, you have a very diverse group of people you're working with. If they just look and sound like you, and they're with the same skill sets, you are going to run into an issue. On the other hand, if you have a diverse group of people, it's more likely that somebody will point out something of an opportunity or a challenge. So that's another thing we have seen. Diversity of communities is really, really vital. And the third is creating tight feedback loops. How can you have your first moment of learning as quickly as possible when you look at an implementation? Rather than, kind of designing that at a later point, you tighten it up, learn very, very quickly. And that's where the MVP approach came in. So these are just a few things that we have seen. But besides that, I don't want to stand in the way of this great group. So let me just introduce the panel that we have. I'll start off with the one person I don't know, and then I'll take for granted the other three people that I know. So Christina is the only person that I don't know. Christina, great to have you, and now I know you.
It's
And
great to meet you.
you got a very Indian sounding name also. We have a lot of Pintos in India, but I don't know. You might say Pintu or Pintu. Like, how do you say that? Pinto or Pintu?
Pinto.
Pinto. Okay, so we have great. Christina is the founder and CEO at PIT Policy Lab, a tech policy entrepreneur. She has more than 10 years of experience working to advance people-centered technology development and governance in Latin America. So, I learned something new today. I learned about this concept of public interest technology, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from Christina. So, welcome, Christina. Bem-vindo or bienvenidos to this conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy
Yeah, thank you.
to meet you and to meet all of my colleagues.
Lovely to have you here. And now to the usual suspects, at least in my world, people that I know slightly better. I'll start off with Nidhi. And Nidhi is an advocate of responsible tech in media. She's worked for 20 years in media in India, the UAE, the UK, and she's founded an organization that has rapidly become super credible and recognized in India, which is the Citizen Digital Foundation. She's also recently been I think included in a list of 100 people to watch out in the space of AI and technology and responsibility. So, Nidhi, you're now in a list of 100. Congratulations, you're in a list of 100. It's always good in life to be in a list of 100. You made it.
Thank you, Sachin.
But,
It's great to be here. Thank you. And I believe Christina is
yeah.
also on the list, the same list, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, is it? Okay, fantastic. Great. So, Nidhi, wonderful to see you again. Odin is a colleague, former colleague at Ashoka, always involved in something creative, something new. God knows where he draws his continuous creative energy from. But Odin is a partner at Ashoka Germany and the co-leader of Ashoka's new AI lab. He's worked at McKinsey before, and he's co-founded 3 social ventures. I'm always suspecting that it's more even while he's at Ashoka, but I'll take this data point for now. And that is just 3. But Odin, great to have you here and learn from your experiences at the Ashoka AI Lab and how you're prioritizing the focus areas. And finally, the person that I have worked with very, very closely, Daniela. Daniela is the executive director of the Changemakers program at Ashoka. She has a long history of working with technology, having begun many, almost 2 decades back on how technology can transform different communities, different parts of the world. And she co-leads Ashoka's AI lab with Odin. So great group of people, and I want to just dive right in and be able to somehow get some different perspectives going. I'll start off with Nidhi. Nidhi, I'll start with you if that's okay. So, Nidhi, I think one thing that has happened is whether people are using AI or not, or making with AI or not, they've already heard of the challenges of responsible AI. Somehow, one thing that has happened is alongside the growth of AI, at least the story. I'm not saying that it's manifested in the actual design, but at least the story that it has to be responsible has sort of kind of become huge, right? And why do you think it's so important? Do you think the clarion call to build responsibly is justified? The volume of that, why is it justified? Can you talk a little bit about what's at stake here?
Sure, Sachin. Thank you for the question. And once again, I'm super excited to be part of the launch issue of Social Innovations Journal. Thank you, Team Ashoka, and thank you everyone at Social Innovation Journal. So before I start, I just want to actually say one thing, that it's important that we distance our discourses on AI altogether from the popular hype or doom lenses, because they only largely serve sensationalist agendas. So we will talk about what's at stake here, but in more nuanced ways. Now, like a lot of other potent technologies discovered in the past, like combustion engine or nuclear power or the internet or printing press, AI also comes with a set of advantages and risks. We know that. With each of those past discoveries, we've seen a marked increase in capabilities, meaning the risks went much higher. AI's capabilities and risks are unlike anything else in the past, and our ability to keep up has also slowed down. Trust is at stake when the surreal becomes hyper-real, as I think synthetic media expert Henry Ashder has said this. We can't distinguish what's real and fake anymore. Manipulation and exploitation avenues have opened up through synthetic media, avatars, and digital social and knowledge interfaces being taken over by unregulated synthetic content. So it's quite natural for social enterprises to hold some hesitation and skepticism when trying to adopt artificial intelligence into their work of creating value and impact. Yet, black box AI systems are getting embedded into our industrial infrastructures, and that's increasing our economic dependence on them. So this makes it important, or rather urgent, for societies, businesses, social enterprises, and the institutions that govern us to band together now more than later to ensure that AI design and deployment is not concentrated in the hands of a few and are not merely serving extractive business models like we have seen in the past with social media's deployment of AI, or authoritarian regimes that bake AI-based surveillance and control mechanisms into digital public infrastructures that are turning democracies into surveillance states. Then, as we know, existing AI models have a huge bias issue, which leads to exacerbation or amplification of existing social inequities and large-scale discrimination when black box models are integrated into our employment, justice, education, financial, and healthcare systems. Now, there are arguments of reducing human error and increasing efficiencies that are often stretched a little too much to justify the use of AI to automate systems and processes rather quickly. Now, what we need to recognize is that there are systems that should be automated, and then there are others that needn't be automated or shouldn't be automated. For instance, in healthcare, training models on diagnostics to spot anomalies that evade the human eye is great. But automating treatment or prescription and care may not be the best use case. These call for a bit more complex and empathetic approaches. Also, digital personal assistants that summarize news using artificial intelligence or translate investigative reports into different languages for easier accessibility are great use cases. But automating the reporting process or using AI news anchors to report is problematic at different levels. So at Citizen Digital Foundation, we recognize that the most affected of the trickle-down effect of all of this are people in developing economies like India, where priorities of safety lag way behind those of economic gain or hustling through. So while there's an array of complex techno-social problems to choose from and focus on, we consciously decided, and it even feels a little foolhardy at times from an organizational sustainability point of view, but we've chosen to address the root cause. And that's why we try to advocate responsible AI and circularity in tech development to call for more accountability in tech businesses and even informed action in policy making. And we also foster information literacy at end user level. So this is why I think I've tried to summarize some of the stakes that we have. I hope that kind of made sense. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, Nidhi, that set the context quite well and laid out, why the challenge is particularly ex exacerbated here. It also threw up an interesting thing for me. You're absolutely right that the AI adoption in industry has been growing by leaps and bounds. And that has been largely, in its own way, right? Fairly out of scrutiny in any way. At the same time, social enterprises which work with more sensitive use cases have been more guarded. But that also means the AI benefits have not been translated into communities where it could be translated. Maybe communities that actually need them even more than the commercial ecosystem. So there is a challenge that I see, that the reticence is good and bad. In the sense, it's good because it holds things back rather than rushing into it, and bad because at some level the gap of application of the AI into use cases where it could genuinely assist. Like if you were to ask a farmer, would you rather, I mean, we have to ask the honest question, would you rather take a risk on your safety of this kind of receive this benefit? Maybe the answer would be quite interesting, right? Like the choice of citizens to choose what kind of things they want access to. How do you balance these things out? Because can we stay in this split situation where the social applications are lagging massively behind on account of fears of irresponsibility, but also resulting in not enough constructive making?
That's a very poignant thought, Sachin. So we're talking about accessibility of tech and AI at the last mile, and which is very important. And there are social enterprises that are trying to deploy these tools to ensure that the benefits reach where it must reach, rather than making bigger models. It's all about how people can benefit, and real world purpose can be met. This is my personal opinion, that the chips are still in the air with generative AI and the way the technologies are developing and how regulation is still catching up. So a lot of frameworks have come up across the world that suit different regions and cultural specifics, but and people, or social enterprises rather, take the onus of developing responsible AI from the start, as compared to perhaps private entities that are more driven by profit. Despite that, I think there is a little bit more caution to be exercised, because we still don't know how many of the deployments of these tools would pan out in the coming years, because we don't know what those social problems will be. So in the past, we've seen with social media, or even the motor vehicles are a great analogy, that it takes some time for the consequences to emerge. And not that we should really wait that long, but there are principles that guide us to ensure that we mitigate those pitfalls or fallouts as such. But should the onus entirely be on social enterprises alone? I think regulation and policymakers have a huge role to speed up the process a bit more. And I know a lot of countries are doing that themselves, but there's a need to ensure that there are some guidelines to be in place for everyone before they know that, okay, this vehicle or this really potent technology can be driven in so many directions. And, yeah, that's what I think about it.
Got it. Nidhi, I'm going to come back and ask you your the what, when, and how of incorporating AI governance piece that you wrote really threw up a lot of interesting ideas on AI governance. I'm going to come back to you. And if I can't, one thing I would definitely request is, can you please share that on the group so that others can read it? Because I do think AI governance will become such a critical area of innovation, because it's going to be different for people in different domains, different countries, different circumstances. I'm going to leave you for a bit, Nidhi, and go to Odin and Danny to bring to us the experiences and learnings from thinking about how AI could transform the world of social entrepreneurship. Maybe you can also think of a little bit of this dichotomy, the challenge that it's lagged. The AI application has lagged for various reasons, and on the other hand, in the commercial space, it's just tearing through everything. But both of you with the Ashoka AI Lab, it's a few months old now, and you're already you've got your fingers in several pilots inside of Ashoka. Can you tell us a little bit, maybe talking about one or two? How are you looking? What are you focusing on through the Ashoka AI Lab? What kind of use cases are you focusing on? And whoever wants to go, maybe I'll start off by
Sure.
asking Odin, and then I'll come to you, Danny. Yeah, Odin.
Yeah, it's very much driven by what you said earlier, Sachin. You mentioned two things that strike true for us. Like one is that things can go wrong easily when the subject matter is sensitive. So we just don't do stuff that's sensitive. That's very easy. So of course, right? If you want to work around like on the topic of like explaining people their legal rights, then there's no way to avoid the sensitive issues. But at Ashoka, we have like we have like what 500 600 colleagues. We have country offices in 40. Like, there are so many teams and processes and things that we can make more efficient with the help of AI. We can just choose, and we happen to choose the areas of application that are the least risky from a data protection, from ethical point of view. So we just do the most boring things first, yeah, but the ones that save a lot of time still. And the thing that you said is that we should always aim to learn fast, and that's exactly what we are doing. So the AI Lab self-identifies as a prototyping agency, as a group of tinkerers that just builds MVPs and fast. And we are talking like 2 days, right? So we don't build fancy large applications. We like a team comes to us and they have certain pain points, which is like a euphemism for like shitty tasks that repeat every week, and we just help them get rid of it. Yeah, and we don't build like these large scale applications and then like with administrative interfaces. No, we build like the most crappy but at its core working prototype in 2 days, and then we get feedback, and we just make sure like we try to find out if AI can actually help us like achieve this task more quickly and efficiently without introducing any additional errors that are hard to spot. And then only if that works out, we continue the prototype. And then we don't even for the successful prototypes, we don't develop them into full applications. We then use external pro bono partners to do that part so that the Ashoka AI Lab can focus only on getting the next prototype out. And that is with this approach, we were able in the first couple of months to like we have now 18 applications, I think, and like every month 2 3 more. So it's like we are like a machine, like you know every month a few applications, and but not to its full development, only to see if there's potential, and if so, to outsource it to external partners to fully develop them.
Super interesting. I'm going to come to you, Danny, with a follow-up on that. But it's actually, you know, I think you lay this out also in the start tinkering before building piece that you put out. I would please do share that with the group if possible. But I think just starting really small, starting really safe, showing the clear value, demonstrating the clear value, closing the loops on that, which is quite counterintuitive, because one would think Ashoka AI Lab, so you're talking to the top social entrepreneur in the world, and you're building like an AI model or something, you know, like an LLM with the top social entrepreneur in the world. But aren't you tempted? Isn't there sort of an influx of interest, or you know, or an expression of interest by social entrepreneurs, Ashoka fellows, on bringing AI to some of the problems in their missions? Whoever wants to go. Yeah, Danny? Yeah.
So I think that there's certainly interest, Sachin, and I think that people are curious. And at the same time, I think there is a lot of concern. I think that you know, as we know, the narrative around risks has been very present. So there is this two components. And I think what we're trying to do with the AI Lab is to really learn what is the safe way and a way that we can learn quickly. So I think we took a very conscious decision to be a tinkering space, because you said, oh, let's build an LML, and we can do this eventually, but we can't do this if people don't understand what are the implications. So I think that for me, a key component of this process is you know, the field is developing really, really quickly, and we need to increase diversity, as you said, because there are a lot of potential ripple effects and implications that we might not even understand. But one thing that is very clear is the more people that is involved in this conversation and creating what this can look like, the lower the risks are going to be. So I think that, you know, people are commenting on the background. So I think that for us, one key component of this process, for example, is to make this accessible. You know, it's something that people can engage with. It's playful, and it's not this, you know, terrible thing that's going to destroy the world. We need people to play, to be close to it, to experiment. So, you know, in terms of governance, we're thinking, how do we create, you know, sandboxes that, you know, it's not something that's going to create a huge impact. We might go there eventually, but there are steps that we need to go through to reach that place.
Yeah, it's the very opposite of move fast and break things, right? You know, at some level, I mean, makes complete sense, right? Because it creates lots of space to get it wrong, to kind of get really comfortable with it, and to develop almost a language around it for yourself, you know? And I think that's one of the challenges. You know, I don't know if Nidhi, you recall when a few months back, when we were all at this gathering around, you know, AI and its applications in justice, there was such a very wide range, and some things were just playful and nice, and other things were potentially scary, right? And then you realize that the message is we must all be super engaged and constantly making and building, but what? You know, because what are the stakes, right? So I feel like I think it becomes, you know, you know, your approach, Odin and Danny, from an it just makes so much sense, because one is, of course, building the appetite internally, which is, I think, very important for every single person here. You can't just land it without having any culture of engaging with it inside the organization. But it also creates lots of feedback loops. And at the end of the day, you reach a point where your way of thinking about it, your protocols are much better, and you create something that's safer, more responsible, more careful. So I think it makes a lot of sense, even if sometimes you get tempted because you look at a GPT or whatever and you're like, let me throw this world-changing problem at you, and it gives you some kind of answer, and you're like, let's do this. You know, and that's when you realize it's lethal. That's why GPT is really dangerous, because you can throw kind of stuff and say, oh, this is it. It can do an operation on me. It can tell the doctor exactly what needs to be removed, but not,
Well,
except it will occasionally say, remove the spleen. Sorry, you were
but
saying
that's
something,
exactly
Odin.
it. So you mentioned like this too, that we move away from this model of move fast and break things, and we do, in the sense that we believe that our approach is less risky, but we also believe that it's the fastest. So even if you don't care about risk, we
It's
still think
fast.
that our
It's definitely
approach
move
is the best.
fast.
Because
Absolutely.
like what do you need? Like, let's say your end goal is to create your own LLM or whatever, like something fancy, like pick your thing, like, or to monitor the rainforest with a new model, or like all the fancy things that we are going to hear later on in this series. Well, if you don't start an organization like you did, Sachin, from scratch, and you get all the necessary expertise and people who are already onboarded, like then, like if you're working with a legacy organization like we did at Ashoka, well, in order to do the fancy thing, you need a lot of things in place. You need some development capacity. That's what the AI lab is building. You need some governance processes. This is what we are doing with like with Anae and people from our integrity and ethics teams. You need some basic AI literacy within your organization. That's what we are doing with basic trainings and by developing these prototypes with dozens of teams within Ashoka. You need some legal expertise around this. This is what we are building right now. You need some IT infrastructure that you need to build up from scratch. That's again what we are building with easy applications first, so that then we can do more fancy things. So like if you just, even if speed is your only and ultimate goal, this step by step doing boring small things first, but with very rapid iterations is still the best way to do it, we believe.
Yeah, and you know, Odin, you really said a few things that lead very naturally to Christina's work, because you spoke about really the aspect of the participation. Is there diversity in participation? Are the right perspectives in the room? And I think that is so integral to Christina, your work. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that public interest technology, the thinking around that has been around for a while, but suddenly with the creation of AI and with its potential impact, the stakes are so much higher, and it seems like we don't have the practices as organizations and communities to really be able to bring the right structures to ask these questions. So, Christina, I'd love to hear from you. What's your take on, um, what is it that we need to do to ensure that we don't make big missteps in the kind of world building that's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years?
This is an excellent question. I hope I had all the answers, but I can share a bit from my own experience of what has worked and what I realized. I have a background in public policy, so for the past 10 years, I've been working with local government, with national governments in Latin America, and specifically in Mexico. And I think I see over and over again, after these many years, that the same things keep repeating. And I think the first thing has to do with starting with a solution in mind and not necessarily with understanding the problem that we're trying to solve for. And this is huge because when we're talking, and I think that the main problem is that we're talking about artificial intelligence and not about problems that need to be solved where AI can play a role or cannot even. So and I think this is important because, of course, I mean, AI is like the new sexy, and we throw it here and there, and all the companies have like this added value when they use the artificial intelligence slang. But I think the work that needs to be done is to sit down with the people that we're developing products or policies or services for, to understand what are their pain points, and then from there to see if AI can play a role. And then there's, I think, another huge piece of it that has to do with the social technical approaches. It seems like the end goal is to produce a technology, to develop a system, and then to prove that that system works. And then when we have good results in terms, I don't know, of accuracy or in terms of a percentage, we end there like saying, oh, okay, so the recommendation that the system is providing is great. But we forget, and this comes from a perspective of working with governments, that it's just information that we're providing to a decision maker, to a person. So what we really have to make sure is that that person, that decision maker, has the training, the tools at their disposal, so they can actually do their work better. If it's a policy, improve evidence-based policy making. If it's identifying and mitigating for gender bias, for instance, precisely doing that, so we make sure that the policies that are intended to serve a specific person, a group of people, actually caters to them. So I think so that's I think the follow-up of projects, of technology projects, are critical. Then I think there's well, from my perspective, from the field of the public interest technology field, this is a nascent discipline. It's been around, the concept as such, for the past 5 to 7 years. But I think it's an umbrella term that allows us to bring different communities of practice together, like the civic technology, the open government, the open data, the GovTech communities. And what I really like about this concept is that as an umbrella, it puts the focus on the public interest, on leveraging technology for the public interest. And even though it's mostly focused, it's a growing field, like growing exponentially in the United States, we're starting to see elsewhere in the world examples of public interest technology of organizations that might not even self-identify as practitioners in the field because they might not know it, but that are doing work in the field. And it's really interesting because we're starting to see self-identification of people in this field in countries like New Zealand, in mostly in academia through this UN network that New America has created, in Latin America. So I think what's important is to be able to democratize the field because there are so many use cases and examples of applications. But what's really unique, I think, is that the kind of perspective that we countries from the global majority can provide to these kind of debates. And I want to go really quickly back to the question or to the point that you were making at the beginning about the importance of AI governance and to what Nidhi was saying about the need to regulate. I think this is paramount, and I think the European Union has been leading some conversations, and then we have the United States, and we have different countries developing their own national AI strategies and agendas and regulations. But I also think there's a lot of value on looking at some examples on how big tech companies are putting ethical principles into practices. There are some use cases that have been developed by the World Economic Forum on the ones that I recall are Microsoft, IBM, and Salesforce, that I think provide an excellent reading and an example on how a global company can put those principles into practice through their specific teams and products. But something that we have argued for the past couple of years with them is that all of these examples are based in global north countries. So if these are global countries, global companies in essence, why not replicating those same examples in their emerging and growing markets? I think the results might change and would give them insight, different insight, valuable insight to see how those tools can be, those tools can be scaled and used elsewhere, or if they're context based. So I think what's really important is to focus on why context matters, and on giving us the opportunity as practitioners from global majority countries to also contribute with our own use cases and examples.
Christina, that was so well constructed. And what I really love about it is showing a way which is really being able to curate the right people, conversations, perspectives for the right people, which is hard work, right? Like, because the truth of the matter is people are so used to their tribes. If you see technologists, they sit with technologists. You see policymakers, they sit with a certain group of people. And the tribes are so strong that even when they declare that they need diversity, they need perspectives, it's still them supplying the perspectives. You still don't see original voices. You still don't see original representation. So I think it's really hard work that you're talking about, the work of bringing all the voices together, finding the representations that curate what we call curatorial work, and I really feel that, it comes through so clearly in what you're saying, that can you really do the curatorial work that is needed for better perspectives to emerge, for more clarity to emerge? Because honestly, the making is going to happen, but either it can happen in a tribe or it can happen with the right principles and diversity, right? So really beautifully articulated. And I hope that we're going to see more people and organizations that are willing to do the hard work of building these different, stitching together these different actions and actors and perspectives. It's hard work because you have to discover, you have to engage.
And if I can quickly comment, it is time-consuming work, the mapping of the people and the identification of different disciplines. We have a network of public interest technology Latin American consultants that have backgrounds in digital activism, data science, digital anthropology, gender and technology, inclusive design, pedagogy. Like we really need to think outside the box, because because the applicability of AI can be in any
Absolutely.
field. And I think something that's amazing about our era is the power of humanities. Is that people with a background in social sciences have a superpower, have the superpower to contribute to the creation of the systems and of the products, services, policies of the present and of the future. So that's why it's so important that we push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we make sure that we give a seat to the people. And I love this phrase that says that or more or less paraphrasing it, like if you don't have a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. I think that's about it. Like we have to create these kind of spaces, but we have to do it intentionally. It doesn't happen on a void. So, and there are organizations in the global majority mostly that are already doing this kind of work. So I think what is important is to put them on the spotlight.
Absolutely. And I hope to we see this work, you, Nidhi, whole bunch of other people doing much more of this work, this painstaking work in the next few years. I know I'm mindful of time, otherwise I would love to dive into more on the governance and stuff, but let's frame that as a question, right? So just opening up here, please do bring your questions for Odin, for Danny, for Christina, for Nidhi. And, of course, their writings are going to be made available. And big thanks to Social Innovation Journal for compiling all of this stuff and putting it together. But let's open up for questions.
I think what we can also do, Sachin, just for the sake of time, is for people to keep their questions, bring them at the end. So let's go into the second panel, and then we bring them at the end, and make sure that we hear voices from other people here. Unless there's a burning one now, I think we can do that.
I saw the clock and I realized that we were the very opposite of move fast and break things. We were move extremely slow and make things. So over to the next person. I'd like to invite Anai, you're moderating the next one. Over to you. Thank you.
I am. Thank you. So thanks everybody. We now had a chance to kind of set the context, right? Why do we need to, how do we get started, and how do we get it right when we get started? And now we want to dive into some of the case studies that are featured in the journal. There's a wide variety in the journal itself, some focusing on health and justice and media and gender-based violence and lots of different use cases. For now, we're going to be focusing on 3. And so I'm going to introduce very quickly the authors that are here with us today. The first is Laura Sommer, joining us from, well, usually based in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. I think right now you may still be in the US. Yeah. And Laura is a social entrepreneur. She is the co-founder of FactChequeado and general director of Chequeado, the first fact-checking organization Argentina, Latin America, and the Global South. And so she comes to us from the media context, really dealing with issues related to misinformation, what others refer to as fake news. And so that's the perspective that she'll be bringing in a second. We also have Smita Gupta, who we heard about earlier, who's a co-creator of the co-leader of OpenAI, which is a part of Agami, a justice innovation field catalyst in India. We heard a little bit more about Agami and OpenAI, so I'm going to find a few seconds to add to the discussion from here. And of course, Smita was a co-editor of this edition of the journal. And then finally, last but not least, Hera Hussain, who's the founder and CEO of Chen, a global nonprofit that creates resources on the web to address gender-based violence. So I'm going to jump right in so that we try to gain some time for discussion at the end and bring you, Laura, into the, oops, I replaced myself instead of adding you. That's too much multitasking for me, but here we go. So, Laura, it's really great to be with you. And I think where I want to start our conversation is with the title of your article, which is Welcoming AI and Turning It into an Unprecedented Ally to Tackle Disinformation in Spanish and Other Languages. The welcoming AI part is the one that might be surprising to people who are following what's going on in the news and all the doom and gloom around the exponential rise of misinformation because of AI. And so I'm very curious about why you're enthusiastic. Why do you think we should be welcoming AI into the media ecosystem, and how?
Yeah, I think the title is not as surprising after listening to the colleagues. I think as social entrepreneurs, we must all the time try to find a solution for the problems that we address. And the narrative with artificial intelligence and generative AI during the last 1 year or 1 year and a half was fear. And really part of the problem that we have since we start dealing with the disinformation phenomenon or misinformation phenomenon is that the volume of the content that is not accurate is much more or is huge in terms of our possibilities as human beings, as journalists, as non-profit media, as local media to address that. And then for sure, for someone that is looking for a solution, but at the same time, a global and a scalable solution, technology and possibilities with finding solutions that can address better that problem are welcoming. And then adding of what Christina said, my biggest concern is how we include in the discussions, in the governance discussions, in the new tools discussion, etc., the global voice. And the voice is from the ones that don't necessarily have the English as the mother language. Because if not, the fear is we are going to increase inequalities really quickly and in a way that we probably can solve it if we start later. And then, perhaps my two messages, if we have the chance to do is, we need to start yesterday, and we need to have funds to experiment. We need to have funds to start doing it now, to make mistakes, to commit failures, but for sure to be doing things that make sense for our communities that are not necessarily the same that in some countries in the north.
I want to pick up on this because this is, I think, the second point that you make around funding. It's not just funding, it's attention, it's teams of people, and which of course comes with funding. But one of the key gaps that we're seeing in the global AI ecosystem is that just like the internet, the priority goes to English content. And when it comes to news and moderation of news, this becomes a very big challenge and one that becomes transnational. So initially you were focused on Argentina, obviously a Spanish-speaking country. You scaled to Latin America because, again, the language for most Latin American countries is Spanish. And so that, this common language allows for that kind of scaling. But then you realized a bit later on that this problem was actually also present in the United States, where there's a large Spanish-speaking population, and nobody was addressing the issue of misinformation in Spanish because of this focus on the majority language, English. How are you leveraging AI to address this challenge, the transnationalization of misinformation in Spanish?
To be fair, it's not that there were no one focusing on disinformation in Spanish in the US. They were just small disparate efforts without taking into account at least 3 or 4 things that we learn outside. And one was, as Sajid mentioned, collaboration. That is not even an option for us. The second is we need to listen much more It's not that we know the agenda that matters for these communities, that is not just one monolithic Latino community in the US. Perhaps there are 20 different Latino communities in different states in a huge country. And the third one is there are different problems, and there are also different formats and channels to reach the attention of these communities. If we continue writing super well written pieces that gonna take people 17 minutes to read, probably someone that's working outside their house for 12 hours and commuting 2 hours, we are never gonna be having their attention if we are not prepared to reach them in the way they need us. That probably is a 1 minute video or an audio for WhatsApp or a visual piece just for scroll. And then we should figure it out how we take advantage of AI for helping us doing this without increasing our cost to something that is impossible.
Can you give us an example of how you're doing it with AI?
Yeah, we start, and I'm super happy 2 of the Chequeados developers are here in the public, and we start using AI before AI is a trend or a sexy person in the room or in the party. We start using in 2016, basically because we realized that we have a problem that human beings couldn't solve as well as machines at that time. And the problem at that time were just that we invest a lot of hours of our reporters in small newsrooms listen to interviews of politicians to identify claims to check. And that was at the beginning the problem that we tried to solve. And then we started using AI to help us to identify that claims without investing human hours on doing that. Because as we have small newsrooms and small teams and good human sources are expensive, we won't use them in the place and in the ways that we are the most important. And in the field of disinformation, the most important is context. Machines are not necessary, at least not now, good enough to identify humor, satire, some slang terms, some cultural or idiosyncratic ways of address or refer to different topics. And then we start doing that. And the reason why in a small newsroom in Argentina, now we have 5 developers working since then is because we all the time discuss what are the problems that we need to solve using technology and not on the other way around. It's not that we are just jumping to the trend to use AI to convince someone to give us money. It's exactly the opposite. Is we have or we need to, in all the disinformation field, times matter, and you know that time matters a lot. Because if some false narratives start to be real viral, it's much more difficult to address it with impact or with positive impact. Then what we need to know is we need to know as quick as we can what is harmful and viral or start to circulating. And for that, the team is now creating and using AI, a tool to better monitoring and better detect, for example, in the US, disinformation in Spanish. Because as I mentioned, the conversation in these communities are not necessarily super big conversation. And then the standard or the average tools that detect the viralization of this information in English is not necessarily good enough to detect this conversation that can be really harmful, for example, for Mexican in Texas or Puerto Rican in New York or Cubans in Florida, but not necessary for the average American. And then we need to create that. And we also need to continue advocating with big techs. As you mentioned, all the responses are not necessarily equal. What we are proving now with Fact Chequeado being in the US and not necessarily in Latin America is in some cases exactly the same video in English and Spanish is not receiving the same response from Meta or from TikTok or from YouTube.
Because of lack of investment in content moderation in other languages. Yeah, absolutely. Laura, thank you so much. I would ask you a million more questions, but I'm gonna jump to Smita
Thank you.
now. And thank you so much. And actually, the question of language is one that will come up with all three of you. So Smita, welcome to the spotlight. And let me give you maybe a little bit of context for
Sure.
where you're working and why you're working with the issues of justice. So just for people who don't know, like I said at the beginning, OpenAI is focused on transforming the field of justice or the experience of justice in India for all Indians ultimately. But one thing that's maybe not obvious is that less than 2% of people in India have access to legal aid, and it's a country of 1.4 billion people. So the scale of the challenge here is absolutely massive, and you can see why looking to technology to solve for some of those access issues makes sense. So in the case of OpenAI, you decided to bridge the gap by leveraging AI. And I want you to give us an example of what that can look like. So, and I just gave a teaser to the audience around language being a really important piece of the equation. So paint a picture for us of a use case here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anay. And to carry on to the context a little bit, we are, of course, the most populous country, but also has every religion in the world represented in our populace. We have, class issues, of course. We also have a caste system, which creates some other hierarchies in the society. At the same time, we are a very diverse and tolerant society as well. So that, of course, requires for a very unique and individual, novel sort of treatment of access to justice. So since you asked for a use case, I would love to share one. And I may have sort of cheated the system because I knew what was coming. So I have a deck. I hope I can present it. Awesome. So yes, scaling access to information through multilingual AI chat. I know chatbots are everywhere, but there's a reason. And once, when last year ChatGPT was launched, we were sort of thinking, how do we make this relevant for Indians? And some of the foundational blocks had already been present in our ecosystem, in our minds. The language piece, especially Bhashini, which is a language platform created by the government of India, has accessibility for all 22 Indian languages. Those are our official languages, and unofficially we have more than 100 languages. It has ability to, using AI, translate between different languages, do a speech to text, text to speech, etc. So when we started thinking about some of these building blocks available and then having ChatGPT in the area, we sort of built what is something called Jugalbandi, and which is thanks to Sachin, who's our chief naming officer. But Jugalbandi essentially in Hindi means a duet, especially in classical Indian music. And the idea is that you're having a conversation, you're having a duet, a deep conversation with the bot, with the machine. And this is AI powered. But during the conversation that you have, you're able to do it at your pace in a language that you understand. You can do it in voice if you're not literate. You actually access information which you can rely on. It's verified information. So it's an AI-powered multilingual and multimodal chatbot. Let's look at some of the features or some of the key characteristics which makes Jugalbandi what it is. I've already mentioned the multilingual part. Multimodal is that you can, of course, receive and send messages in both text and voice. So imagine I am a farmer living in rural India, and I want to understand if there are any government welfare programs that can benefit me if I'm starting with the new harvest season and I need to buy pesticides and fertilizers. And I go on the bot and I just send a voice note on WhatsApp, because that is one of the most accessible media platform today. I send a voice note on WhatsApp saying, I'm a farmer, I want to do this, I have 2 acres of land, can you help me? And in real time, you get a response back saying in your language that yes, these are the 5 government programs that you could be eligible for, giving you this amount of fiscal benefit, especially if you are above, let's say, 30 years of age. So it confirms with you what your age is. So there's almost like a back and forth conversation happening to determine your eligibility. Now, you may think that, why do we need AI? And that's one of our favorite questions at OpenAI, to always never assume that AI should be the first sort of port of safety. We always look at AI as whether the solution really has to be scalable. Is it really complex? Is it really mundane? And of course, when we sort of build this architecture of Jugalbandi, we realized that this could really scale. And in fact, it could be domain agnostic. It didn't have to rely on only law and justice use cases. And I'll come to this next slide with that. Sorry. Yes, I want to show this first. So this is sort of the architecture of how this works, right? So not wanting to go too much into the weeds, I'm mindful of time, but essentially a user asks the question in voice over here, which goes here because I've asked in, let's say, a vernacular language, gets translated to English, goes from voice to text. Then there is a privacy filter here for any personally identifiable information. Because what if in my query, I've said I have 2 acres of land and I give my address, because I don't know what to expect. I don't know where my data will go. So we have put in a filter for all of such PII so that it does not even reach us. It definitely does not reach OpenAI or GPT. And then this is sort of where the magic is happening, where we've removed all the information that ChatGPT has of the internet and replaced it with verified, reliable information that the user may want to get information on. So let's say if this is government welfare programs that I've asked about, on the back end would be, let's say, a 100-page document with the 200 government schemes that are available. Actually, India has 20,000 government schemes, but for the sake of this example, only your answer will then only come from this database, right? So this is the database that OpenAI here in the 5th step is going to be looking at. It's not going to be looking at the internet. Now, this will ensure that the accuracy, that the chances of hallucination are reduced further and further. Now, this answer is generated in English, which again goes back to the Bharshini layer, which translates it from English to the vernacular language and from speech to text, and the user receives it in a jiffy. So this is all happening in real life. I will stop in real time, sorry. I'll stop sharing now, but we have seen interesting use cases across law and justice, education, healthcare, finance, and I could go on, but Anay.
With that, yeah, I think this goes exactly to the point and the question that Sachin was asking around, when ChatGPT came out with their capabilities and brought it out to the world, they had no intention or I guess idea that it could be used in this way. And when you have innovators like you and a community of innovators, an ecosystem actually of innovators, thinking about how can this become relevant and actually change the experience of justice or access to health or whatever other applications you can imagine, all sorts of new questions and new applications come up, like the one you just shared, and the new questions, around how do you do this ethically, this privacy filter that you mentioned. It's probably something else that you had to figure out along the way, and you figured it out because you cared about your end users, right? In a way that maybe another company would say, well, we can get away with this for now, let's figure it out later. I would ask you about the ecosystem approach. Maybe somebody from the audience will, and ask how do you build this out in a way that is not just led by technologists or just by lawyers, but actually brings in the entire ecosystem, because I think that's something quite unique. If we don't get to it, it's in the article, so I encourage everybody to go and read it. For now, I'm going to switch over to Hera because we're crazily running out of time. And Hera, welcome. As I said at the very beginning, Hera is the founder of Chen. Chen is a digital native organization. And as you know, for those who don't remember what we said almost an hour and a half ago, Chen is focused on supporting victims of domestic violence. There is a network of largely volunteers who develop all kinds of resources for survivors of domestic violence. I think I said victims earlier. I meant survivors. And here, what's I think interesting is that being a digital native organization, it means that none of your work would be possible without technology, because it allows you to reach thousands and thousands of survivors of gender-based violence across the world, across languages. You know, this theme of language just keeps coming up. But one of the things that I think is unique about the way that you build technology is that it's trauma-informed. So can you tell us what that means? What are some of the principles of trauma-informed design that you've developed over the years, and why is it important?
Yes, thank you very much, Annie. So, you know, we say that we developed our sort of all of our work, which includes tech, based on our trauma-informed principles, which are sort of derived from about a decade of working on on gender-based violence. And the principles, are some of the stuff that you'd expect an organization that is working with people who've experienced trauma to, think about, things like safety, privacy. But we also have other ones like agency, equity, sort of accountability, power sharing, hope. And the idea that these principles are not really like a checklist, but these are the values that we want to embody throughout our like tech creation process. So whether that is, and not all of the principles will apply to all of the things, but they're supposed to be like our guiding lights, and also a way for us to check that we are really centering survivors. Because the problem with just thinking about like diversity in teams and leadership, all those things are so important. I'm a big advocate of that, but we are only as good as what we are in that moment of time. Whereas with a community-led approach, if you think about your products as never being the final product, and you have these principles, then you can always reflect on them and be like, okay, actually for this particular community. So if we're looking at, we have products that are very focused on survivors of gender-based violence, that could be domestic violence and sexual violence, that are in unsafe situations right now. So the principles that we need to be heavier on will be different for those versus the products that we're creating that are for survivors who are not in unsafe situations, like physically. So they are actually independent, and they need a different kind of healing support. So it really just allows us to have that, and also challenge ourselves to be like, how are we benchmarking ourselves for this? And those principles are open for everybody to have a look at. And also, we do sort of training on them as well. So it's other people in other sectors have found them useful too.
What I found particularly interesting and timely about the piece that you co-wrote with your colleague Nadine, it's called Chatbots and the Complexities of Delivering AI-Enabled Support to Survivors of Gender-Based Violence. Here you talked actually about how even after embedding trauma-informed design into the design of a chatbot that was meant to serve the community that you do as early as 2017, so similar to Laura, early adopters here. And even then you saw that there were some serious pitfalls, and you actually decided to take down your chatbot after a few years of experimentation. So can you tell us a little bit about what you learned through that experience and what you recommend to people who are thinking about use cases in high-risk situations like the ones that you work in?
Yes. So we, I never let money stop me from doing anything. We got a micro grant, and we just like worked with some students to blast out like a very hacky version of a chatbot, and the mission was very clear. There's going to be almost no chat, but the bot was going to help people with pre-filled options to kind of navigate across we have a universe of content, and to help them get to the content that's most relevant to them. And it was trying to break out of this linear thing, which is like, if you're based in France, you must speak French. So we will only show you the French content. Or if you're, coming from the US or the UK, then you are only speaking English. And we know that the realities of migration and everything and bilingual communities are not the same. So we just wanted to create something really, really helping people search. But that's not what happened when we saw the way people were using it. We saw that people were, we made it very clear the chatbot was a cat. It introduced itself as a cat, said that, there's no human here. I can only understand very little things. It was really upfront and transparent about its limitations. But I think that when people are in crisis situation, they're so overwhelmed, and the need is so great for support. And there's just not that many avenues for support that are responsive, free, global, that they found that they would find Chen, and then they would be trying to find a human. And obviously we don't list any of our contact details because we're not a crisis support organization. So we discourage people from getting in touch with us just out of nowhere. But they would find the chatbot. And of course, they would message the chatbot. And there was just so much pain and suffering and disappointment in the chat logs, because we had options for people to enter free text. And it was just really depressing and harrowing to read through those scripts. So we had the option of, okay, well, we can continue improving it. We could tweak it, or we just take it down. And I just, with the community, we decided that the most ethical thing for us to do would be to take it down. And if we were going to go back into something like this again, being transparent is not enough, because the nature of chatbots is that people expect a response, and people think at some point a human is gonna be there to read it. So how can we, when we're not going to be doing that, how can we design in a way that is not just transparent, but I think it has to be designed completely differently to respond to that. Whereas I think there's still lots of interesting ways that sort of AI-enabled chatbots can be used. I just think for crisis situations, it's so important that we cannot replace human care with that. You can be information finding one, like the Jugalbandi one is an interesting example of it's not a crisis situation. People definitely need and it's access to information, helping people find something. But where it's trying to replace, there are lots of chatbots actually in the social innovation space. Some of them have won awards as well, which if I was in the jury, I would not do this. But they have many award-winning chatbots which are giving counseling to women young girls, and who are experiencing sexual harassment. And I just think that I'm very I have lots of reservations around that. What I think would be really good is if people have questions about breast cancer, having an assistant to help you with that. I'm also very wary of chatbots that are used to reduce loneliness. I really think this is the next frontier when it comes to human rights, is chatbots being used to and sort of AI girlfriends being used to reduce loneliness and to supplant human intimacy, whereas it really cannot achieve that. And we just further entrench patriarchal misogynistic values into society, and just doesn't really help with the sort of the elimination of that kind of culture on the web.
Thank you, Hera. I'm going to bring back all of the panelists just as we close, and ask the audience finally, if you have questions, we would love to hear them. We had probably a bank of 10 more questions we would have asked our panelists here, but we want to hear from you. So please chime in if you have a question, either through the chat or through just raising your hand or unmuting yourself. I don't know if I can pin more people than I already have. It seems like it's stopping me from doing that. If not, I will ask. Oh, we have Valeria. Valeria, please, we'd love to hear you.
Hello, hello everyone. I am Valeria from the Trust Fund in the Americas. We work on projects on technology and more recently AI for social impact in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. And I am joining from Brazil. And at the beginning, I heard a lot about how to implement AI and data projects safely. And I think it was Odin that mentioned that they do more work on smaller projects that are have a lower risk. And here in Brazil, there are many ongoing discussions on how to implement AI regulation safely and what is high risk and what should be allowed. But one of the main points and one of the challenges that the temporary cohort of legislators and the people regulating what they are seeing, and I think other countries are also facing this too, is how can we balance or better understand the line between doing AI and data projects safely and also not having a negative impact on innovation, because one of the things that worries a lot Brazil is that because of data protection and what is considered a high risk, that could slower or even prevent from Brazil, the Brazilian startup ecosystem having access to developing more leading AI innovation. So how can we balance this? I think it would be my question.
I could take this question. Innovation versus regulation, I guess, is the summary. How do you get the balance right?
Yes, you summarized my 2-minute question. Thank you.
Such a great question. I mean, this is the question that is sort of active across the whole world. How do you get the balance right?
I think we heard a few suggestions from Hera, from Nidhi, from Laura, about picking the right use cases and having, I mean, in this case, the safeguards were kind of internal to the organizations. They weren't necessarily guided by regulation. But Nidhi, I see now you raise your hand.
So this is something that I often speak about. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that here. First of all, I think it's okay to recognize that there may not be an immediate balance between regulation and innovation, and that is okay. It's not something that we have to always strive for. There is always a push and pull. So we classically hear this from startup communities and especially the governments that we interact with, that regulation is only going to stifle innovation. And anything that you talk about safe and responsible practices is just going to hinder the aspect of growth, the whole aspect of moving fast and breaking things. So then we always bring in analogies and try to say that, we're building Ferraris here. So we cannot build Ferraris without seatbelts and airbags. So if you do that, your Ferrari is going to end up crashing one day, and it's just the whole point is lost. The other thing is that regulation also spurs innovation in human interest. So we've seen how regulation of motor vehicles has led to innovation happening in electric vehicles. So it's not that it is going to stifle innovation, it just stifles toxic innovation and it just redirects innovation into healthier spaces. That's in the interest of humanity. That's a thought process we need to put into it. That's it.
Annie, we'll give you the last word and then close out so we can be on time. But go ahead, Annie.
Yes, and hopefully you guys can hear me better this time. I was going to say that there's also an element of it's not a black and white question. It's like, oh, regulation is going to stop everything, and so you need to prevent people from creating. I think that just like what we are doing inside of the organizations, there are spaces that you can move quickly, but then, there is a set of steps that if you want to make something available to everyone, then there should be a lot of steps to get to that point. So I think that as it was said here, it's right now, a lot of the narrative is very, as the world, very extreme. It's like either innovation or regulation. I think that this needs to be a much more nuanced, and the way to improve this conversation, I think, as everybody has said here, is to bring more voices. And so we can learn from the way that this has been done in social innovation, right? I think a lot that of the examples here show great uses, and elevating this so policymakers can understand the different ways that this can bring impact without causing harm.
And if I can use this as a way to also close and bring it back to the original purpose of publishing this edition of the Social Innovation Journal, and thanks again, Nick and team, for making that possible, was precisely because we see, a need to kind of build a different narrative, not just a doom and gloom narrative, and not just an innovation versus regulation narrative, but actually showing from the point of view of practitioners, people who are deeply embedded in communities, who put ethics in the center of their work. How does this work? How do you build this in a way that is innovative and that takes the interest of the public at heart, and make those how-tos more democratic, this is a first step in all of that, and a humble one, of course. We know there's many other people who are more advanced than us, as a collective, especially technologically, but we have a perspective, I think, from a social innovation standpoint that is rarely available, and that we want to kind of build an ecosystem for. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Sachin and Smita, for co-creating this with us, and to all the authors here, and to Social Innovation Journal. I don't know if Nick, you want to say a last word, or Nikolai, but I think we are almost ready to close.
No, thank you very much to Ashoka and the team, and it's fantastic. I love when you put the words, make the articles come alive. And I hope we inspired everybody to go dig deep into each of the articles and read more. But thank you so much again.
And thanks you, Social Innovations Journal, for the platform. It was a fascinating discussion.